Welcome to the video. Hi, my name is Autumn. I'm a reader and a writer, and today is going to be a writing video. So in the past, at the end of the year, always do a writing recap. We talk about all the things I did, I didn't do from the goals that I set from the year before, and then we try and set some goals for the upcoming year. If I did that for this video, we would only be here for 5 minutes. So instead of doing that, I decided to do a little bit of a different video. The conversation that I really want to have is how grad school changed my perception on writing and how it kind of boosted my creativity. Quick disclaimer before we get into all the things. I am not saying that you need to go back to school to get a master's degree, to get any sort of education, to have these same experiences that I'm having. I just feel like in the last year and a half in my writing journey, a lot of it, like creatively, has been persuaded by what I've been learning about in school. I'm not saying that anybody needs to be spending thousands of dollars to go back to school to gain these experiences. Definitely not what I'm talking about here, and definitely not what I'm saying. So please do not jump at your first opportunity to go back to grad school, to go back to school to take courses, to get some other type of degree. That's not what I'm saying. Definitely not what I'm saying. Can you hear me in the background there? Yeah, not what I'm saying. This grad school is not for writing or anything English related. It is public health. Also, I write just for fun. I am a hobby writer. I would absolutely love to have something published one day, but a lot of my writing I do for myself, and I always want to improve my writing. If I get published one day, that would be fantastic. And if I don't, we tried, we had fun, we still love the craft, and we're just gonna keep doing our thing. So go ahead, grab your favorite beverage, and we're gonna get on into it. In fall of 2024, that's when I started my master's program. And in this master's program, we had to do a ton of reading. It was like reading, research, we would submit papers, or we would have to do presentations, and we would get feedback. Like in the writing industry, when you write a novel, you submit it to beta readers, critique partners, you get feedback on it, you read the feedback, you implement it, you make changes if you feel like you need to make those changes. If there's anything that's developmentally wrong with it, you have to make all of those changes. Grad school has really taught me to be a lot more accepting. I always feel like I have been accepting of feedback and knowing, not everybody's going to like your work, and sometimes people are a little more blunt about that, and that's okay. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But I do think that grad school has taught me to grow a backbone and to know not all feedback that is critical has to be negative or vice versa. I think if the day comes where I ever have published work out there and I can still be passionate about it, I can still love this project, but I can still have that certain level of disconnect from it and respect where somebody's gonna read my story one day, if it's ever out there in the world, and they're just not gonna like it. And that's fine. You're not supposed to like everything you read. There's plenty out there that other people love, and I know that they would die on the hill that I just don't like. And vice versa. There are some books out there that I will die on that hill with that book every single time. But I respect that not everyone's going to feel that same way. And I think that's such a critical piece of it. It can be sometimes difficult to understand that not everybody is going to accept your work or to like it or want to support it. Sometimes on the internet things come across a different way. You're like typing something out, it could just be very genuine, very honest. It can be read as being blunt, which I feel like sometimes had happened in grad school, not necessarily with me because I don't have a soul, so it's gonna just like roll off my back and I'm good to go. But some students would sometimes share a discussion post, whatever the topic was, and then someone else would respond, and maybe there were mixed signals about how the message was sent and how it was received. Although I do think that's something that maybe if I had gotten more feedback and I was able to grow from sharing my story a little bit more, maybe that's something I would have learned sooner rather than later. Or sometimes, unfortunately, those are things that people learn the hard way when you share art. When you share your work with others, that's how you grow. It's kind of a bummer that I spent 4 years just writing for myself and not writing and asking for feedback. That is something for the new year I want to try and be a little bit better at, where I will write something, edit it, do my best, send it off to somebody. That's absolutely something I would love to do. I think that feedback is absolutely critical, and I can't believe it took me that long and that much money from grad school to realize that feedback is absolutely critical. Where I'm at as a creative writer now versus where I was 2 years ago is a significantly different place, because I'm taking my time to actually think about the research or the characters that I'm creating and trying to make them feel like real people. And I feel like I've gotten a lot more experience too with seeing all sides of a research project. One of my research projects, we actually had to go out into the community and take notes on just like public health things that are around as I'm writing, and it makes me think about those details and it gives me a more critical eye, and it also makes me think of things that I might not ever think about. Kind of makes me feel a little bit more part of the world, like part of the fantasy world. You know, if I was able to just be in this village with these people, how are they going to react to certain situations compared to other people on another side of the world? How are they going to react to the world or to react to the same situation? While I'm not claiming I am an expert in any way, shape, or form, I do think that going through these classes, especially in public health, it's everything, right? It's such a broad thing, makes you think of the world through a much larger lens. And I think that it has helped with my writing. While I'm inserting myself into the story, it makes me want to take that step back and say, okay, so if we're in this part of the world, how is this culture? How are these people going to respond to X, Y, and Z compared to we're going to be in this other village or in the high court? How are they all going to be responding and interacting with each other, but also with like their surroundings, and what all about these surroundings are significant? It's also made me realize that I love writing about certain things like that. Like, I don't mind writing about disease. I don't mind writing about illnesses. I am kind of leaning into that more when I am writing my story Project Ice. There are a couple of illnesses that are going on over here, and then there's a chronic illness that's been going on in like another part of the world that is significant to the overarching plot of the story that is going to make sense with what's actually happening over the entire novel. I'm like adding those small little tidbits because that's like also what's interesting to me. If it can strengthen my writing and can strengthen my connection with the readers, you know, through the story that they're going to be reading, why not include something like that? It was unintentional that my mug matched my shirt. Grad school has really taught me how to be extremely analytical. Even though I'm a very analytical person, I love the facts, I love the data, I like to think logically about things. I think that this grad school, like this program, really helped me also kind of like home in on all of that and to really make me think critically about a lot of things. Next on my list is I always knew that I loved research. I always knew that I loved finding a research topic, researching the heck out of whatever the topic is. It has translated into my creative writing because I can do that too. For an example, in this high fantasy story, there are a few events that I want to happen in this that have kind of happened throughout our history, and then figure out how I can present that into a high fantasy world. You know, maybe instead of it being like the 300, everything that surrounded that, maybe you can spin it onto its head and do something different. Like, I don't know what, because if I tell you, it could be a spoiler for my book. But I do think too, doing all of this research, your main theme, the main research topic that you're going to have, and then you have a bunch of research questions. I feel like that can also translate really well into having a high fantasy story. So, you know, I have my main plot, and then I'm going to have the subplots, which are going to be questions. They're going to be like, how do these certain things, like these subplots, how do they tie back into the main plot? It's helped me a lot more with the problem solving and to kind of think outside of the box. I've also allowed myself to ask myself the questions, what if I changed this topic or this plot point and or did something more along these lines? Like, what would happen here? I feel like it's made me a lot more open to making those changes. It doesn't have to be so cut and dry. It's really helped me try and make my story a little less flabby, if that makes sense. Trying to be intentional about, you know, what I'm putting in the novel and how is that going to fuel the main plot or to help with those subplots. So the last two things that I want to share, I have found a much better way to write research papers. So before, I would write it linearly. That is also how I will still kind of write my creative writing projects. It should be linear. However, I kind of jump around a little bit. It's a little messy and it's like so hard to explain because I feel like it can get confusing. But when we do research papers, we'll have the main topic, and then sometimes we need to answer some of the questions. Sometimes I don't answer those questions linearly. There are 4 questions that circle back to what the main topic of our research is. Sometimes I can answer some of those questions sooner rather than later. So I answer those questions. Maybe they're not going to take me quite as much time. They're not going to be quite so in depth. And I feel like that translates to my creative writing. Sometimes there are going to be some chapters, some characters who come to me like that, right? Like, I can just sit down and write this character's chapters. It's smooth as butter. There can be some other times and some other characters where and research topics where I am stumped. It takes me forever to write certain projects or certain chapters, research certain like specific topics for a certain research project or topic, and it's just going to take forever. But the whole point of me bringing that up, no, it's okay to have a writing process that can be a little chaotic, it can be a little non-linear. It's whatever works for you, and it's whatever works for, you know, the project you're working on, or, you know, like whatever research you're working on. I have found that doing that in research and then kind of applying that to my creative projects, I feel like it actually makes that process go a lot faster. I don't want to say like jump throughout the story, but if I know that there's something that I want to happen in my high fantasy project, Project Ice, that is going to happen in chapter 10, but I'm not quite sure 7, 8, 9, what's going to happen in those chapters to get here. That's okay. We can figure that out, and we can work through the project, figure out, you know, what the end goal is, what's happening in chapter 10, and then how are there any like little seeds, subplots, new characters we need to introduce, and how can we make it all connect. So that was something before grad school when I was working on my creative projects where I felt like it had to be more of a linear process because I had tried to work non-linear. I just kind of tried to do it all sporadically and it didn't really work, and that could have just been wrong project, wrong time. Maybe I didn't have enough experience or confidence to try and just kind of write sporadically and a little chaotic. Do I recommend that for everybody? No. Is it something that I might do for future projects? I honestly have no idea. I just know in this phase of life that kind of writing a little chaotic and sporadic all over the place is working for me, and we're gonna just keep on keeping on, and we're gonna try our best, go from there. I feel like if I compartmentalize, that word always trips me up, compartmentalize my story. So I know I just said it's a little chaotic. Sometimes I'll work like on chapter 10, even though I'm not 100% sure what's gonna go on in like 7, 8, 9. I do like to separate and like block off the story. And I've been learning as I've been writing research projects is you don't have to just vomit it all. You know, it doesn't all have to be done immediately right then and there. You know, you can work on it in bits and pieces. So a great example, working on some type of research project right now with one of my professors. Right now, we're only gathering the research. We're telling you, hey, this is what we're going to be proving later scientifically using statistics, using, you know, facts and logic and all of that. That's going to come later. But right now, this is what you can expect here. Here's a little background on it in the introductory paragraphs. And then once we get all of that set, we're going to move on to the next phase, or like the next section of it, which is going to be like the methods. So we're going to talk about the different types of methods we use to get the data. So how that can translate into my creative writing. We're going to just focus for our first go around, you know, for our first word vomit of this story, or it's technically draft 2. We're going to really focus on all that main plot stuff. Anything that doesn't really have a whole lot to do with like that main plot, or the tiny intricate pieces explaining what a room looks like, or explaining what a magical staff looks like in this world. Or if these people do magic, do they use wands? Do they use objects? What kind of object? That's not important at the moment. It will be important because those are going to be small details, but those are small details that are going to help you or me understand the big main plot of the story. I do really think that going to grad school and writing these research papers and learning how to kind of like structure, compartmentalize, break them down, and also it's a little, I feel like it's a little chaotic at times, but it's like organized chaos. And as long as you understand that process and it's working for you, it's been working for me. Translating what I've been doing in research, which sounds like a steaming hot mess, and then doing the same thing when I'm writing my stories, the process is working. So we're just gonna keep on keeping on. I think I'm going to leave you guys with that for my last one. I hope you enjoyed this. This was a much longer ramble than I thought it was going to be. Let me know if you have any questions down below in the comments, and we can continue this conversation down there if you want. What is one thing that you have learned about your writing process this year? Let me know down in the comments below, but thank you all so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.